Hey everyone, Chef Scott here with Devil's Food Kitchen. As advertised, 5 tips to make you an instantly better baker. This sounds like clickbait, I know, but I promise you it isn't. These are just some things I've learned over my career, most of them the hard way, and I wanted to share them with you because I think they can apply to anybody to help you bake better and have more fun. So without further ado, let's get started with the first tip. The number one most important thing to bake better, and this is so important that I have a whole separate video on it, is to get a gram scale. Cups, tablespoons, those are not doing you any favors. If you start to measure in grams using a gram scale, you're gonna have more accuracy, more consistency. It makes changing your recipe super easy if you wanna double it, cut it in half, etc., etc. The pros for this go on and on. Again, not going to get into it too much here, but if you really want to start having more consistent product and a lot more accuracy in your recipe measuring, which is so important, you need to get a gram scale. It's just the way it is. The number 2 better baking tip is to stay organized. Now this sounds like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how quickly things can go crazy when you're in the middle of a recipe. Knowing where everything is on your table is the first step to this, and a really easy thing that you can do is simply put your tools down on your work table in the same spot every time. It doesn't matter if you're using a knife or a whisk or a spatula. Me personally, I put them in the upper left corner of my table, whatever table I'm working on, wherever I might be. That way I always know where they are. This is safe too because I'm not leaving a knife blade somewhere where my hand might nick it, and I've done that before. So keep your tools in the same spot. Another trick for this is to only have out what you're using. Raise your hand if you have gone down the line in a recipe and all of a sudden you've got every bowl, every sheet pan, everything in your kitchen on your table when really you just need one item. I'm constantly reminding the cooks that have worked for me or my former students and reminding myself to take things off the table that I don't need to use right now. Helps keep things a little bit more organized and clutter-free, and that's a lot better for your baking. The third tip for better baking is to rest your doughs. You'd be amazed at how much better your recipes can turn out if you let your dough rest in the refrigerator for 2 hours up to overnight. I'm talking about things like pie dough or sweet dough, any cookie dough, even muffin batter. 2 important things are going to happen while this dough is resting. First, flavors are going to meld and intensify. Things like salt or vanilla, any spices are going to get stronger. Your product's going to taste better. Second, you're giving water in the dough time to do all of the important things it needs to make your recipe great. Water is a super important ingredient. It helps products rise, it adds moisture to the final texture of something, it distributes fat and other flavors. It's really important. And when you let your dough rest, you're giving water time to do all those things. As a little experiment, next time you make any cookies, let's say chocolate chip cookies, scoop all of your dough out and bake some of it right away. Let some of that dough rest in the refrigerator overnight wrapped in plastic wrap. The next day, bake those cookies and then compare the two. I think you're going to find a really big difference. Number 4, better baking tip is to scrape your bowls. This might seem weird, but all of that batter that might be left behind in the bowl that maybe didn't do a great job scraping, that represents 2 things. It represents money, because those are ingredients that cost something, and 2, it could be a substantial portion of a recipe. If you've ever scraped out an ingredient from a container, from a mixing bowl, and left a little bit behind, that little bit could be 20% of what you need in your recipe. And if all of a sudden you're starting to leave 15, 10, 20% of your ingredients in the measuring bowls, they're not going into the actual recipe, and the results will then speak for themselves. So make sure to scrape really well. Same thing when you're scraping out batter and doughs, scrape those bowls. I promise you that you will have then a more accurate recipe and your baking will be better as a result. The number 5 better baking tip is really just to remember that at the end of the day, failure is the only way to improve. I know this sounds like a little bit of a psychoanalysis, but the truth is nobody really likes making mistakes. We don't like to fail because we see it as a negative. Turn that around and see it as a positive. Nobody got better doing something because they nailed it every single time. You have to make mistakes to then learn from them. I have made every mistake in the book over the course of my career, most of them multiple times. But I started to see things as a positive because it gave me the opportunity to grow and become a better cook, a better chef. Once you have that attitude, then whatever you're faced with in terms of your recipe or what you're baking is gonna be a fun time. Once you start to get down on yourself or you get too upset over something that got ruined that you spent all day on, then all of a sudden baking's not fun anymore and then we don't wanna do it. So keep in mind that failure is okay. We want that. Give yourself a break when you're baking. I hope you find these 5 quick tips really useful. If you put them into practice and make them a habit, I promise you, you will start baking better right away. If you like this video and you want more like it, please like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things really help me out. And I also love hearing from you guys. And don't forget to turn on notifications so that you never miss a new DFK video when it pops up. Until next time, I am Chef Scott for Devil's Food Kitchen.